Bhutto of Pakistan, His Life and Times by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 8, Free Elections and the Birth of Bangladesh, 1970 to 1971. Zulfi dressed like Mao on the campaign trail, wearing a plain green jacket and a Mao cap, which gave him instant identity both with China and a people's revolution. It was the closest he came in trying to compete with the Awami and National Awami Party leadership of Bengal. At times, he was more specific in identifying his party and people's movement with Mao, though he was always careful to deny any imputations by his opponents that he was a communist. We need a long march, Zulfi told his cheering audience at Abbottabad. When I say that we would undertake a long march, I am duped as a communist. I say that the first long march in history was undertaken by Imam Hussain. Zulfi was so ceaselessly attacked by conservative Islamic leaders for his notorious personal behavior and exotic tastes that he often underscored by such allusions to Islamic tradition that he was first and foremost a Muslim. We shall wage a jihad for the cause of Islam, not only in Pakistan but anywhere in the world, if required. If Muslim blood is being mercilessly shed in India, you cannot just wring your hands. If atrocities are being committed on the Muslims in the Middle East, you will have to do something about it. If the People's Party had been in power and if there had been a people's government in Pakistan, it would not have allowed India to get away with the killing of the Muslims in Ahmedabad. Hindu Muslim riots had recently taken many lives in the capital of Gujarat. Yet, here was another grand promise Zulfi would find impossible to keep when he gained power over Islamabad's administration. Zulfi's bold tactics on the stump and his tireless speechifying seemed to change his batteries rather than deplete his energy. His ability to attract crowds and keep them in thrall started to worry his old friends in Pindi and Lahore, the landed barons, the general officers who once thought they knew and could trust this Vadero actor. Many began to wonder if Ayub wasn't right about the madman after all. Our opponents are joining hands against us, Zulfi warned an audience in Kohat. They are conspiring to oppose a new party because we have come to you with a message that rings true. They know that our voice is your voice. They know that we are not going to betray you. We shall have to launch a long march because we want to bring about a fundamental change. Yahya started to feel more anxious about dealing with Zulfi than about Mujib, who often sounded more reasonable. Yahya's Minister of Information, General Sher Khan, who directed Pakistan's powerful National Press Trust, did his best to keep news of the People's Party and its fiery leaders' increasingly popular speeches out of the daily headlines. Zulfi charged that the press had imposed a blackout on his activities and speeches, though he also insisted that the government-controlled press distorted what he said on the hustings. The Pakistan People's Party had only a few small papers of its own. The daily Musawat, Socialism, and the monthly Nusrat, Victory, were both of which were named by Hanif Rame of Lahore, one of Zulfi's most creative and talented early followers, a poet and an artist, as well as a journalist editor. Neither paper, however, had a circulation even nearly approaching Pakistan's dailies dawn, the Pakistan Times, Morning News, and Evening Star. Zulfi's ability to win mass support was less hindered by negative or negligible press reports in West Pakistan. However, they might have been true elsewhere, even in neighboring India. The chances that most Pakistani readers of major English dailies would have voted for him would only diminish the more his speeches were accurately reported. The Information Ministry did control Pakistan's radio as well as its press, and there Zulfi had better reason to feel aggrieved because radio news was heard by people in all major towns and villages and bazaars. I have been touring this area and there have been processions and meetings of historic proportions. Zulfi protested angrily in Peshawar, but not a word about them over the radio. This is not fair play. Our government claims impartiality. Is this impartiality? Then Zulfi called on Minister of Information, General Ali, as a gentleman to submit his resignation, contemptuously adding, "But you cannot expect this from him. He has always been in service. He knows only how to work for a salary. He should face bullets like we did in Sanghar." In Balochistan, that June of 1970, Zulfi promised his Quetta audience, "This is your party and it will never betray you. This is my word of honor to you." Zulfi now charged that Liaquat Ali Khan was assassinated because he wanted to introduce Islamic socialism. His murder was the result of a great conspiracy. That is the reason also why Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was fired upon in Sanghar. At the end of July, Yahya appointed an election commission, chaired by Bengali Justice A. Sattar, who ordered new electoral rolls drafted throughout Pakistan. It was an enormous job, but Yahya promised elections before the year's close, and everyone hoped they would be held before December. By the end of August, more than 31 million East Pakistanis were named eligible voters, and a little over 25 million in the West. Zulfi knew that challenge of numbers in the East was more dangerous to his chances of winning political power than the combined forces of all the parties arrayed against him in the West. Still, he insisted that August, "I am confident that we shall, by the grace of God, emerge as a majority. No one can stop us." In September, the first natural disaster of the year of catastrophes struck East Pakistan. Devastating floods inundated that low-lying land, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. Rural damages was estimated to be in hundreds of millions of rupees. Polling was to have started in early October, but because of the floods, Yahya postponed the elections till 7th December. A number of People's Party activists and leaders were now thrown in prison as the campaign heated up. Zulfi sensed another conspiracy. Gundaism of the opposition is rampant and is increasing daily. Zulfi wrote Larkana's deputy commissioner, O. M. Kearney, on 16th August 1970, complaining that nothing is done to punish the miscreants, though action is taken against my party workers. His People's Party was being singled out and victimized because we are against the economic system of the capitalists, bankers, feudal lords, and exploiters. Secondly, we do not want a compromise with India. 1,000 miles to the east, worse disasters struck. A cyclone and a tidal wave took an estimated 500,000 peasant lives within a few days. Mujib now insisted that unless his Awami League's 6-point program was fully implemented under Pakistan's new constitution, he would launch a mass movement. He and his followers viewed the approaching elections as their last chance to live in dignity as the citizens of Pakistan, instead of remaining slaves in their own soil. Though he spoke in a different tongue, Mujib used many of the same images as Zulfi, charging that the few privileged families had sucked the blood of Bengal in such a way that the very backbone of the economy had been shattered. Further, a conspiracy was being hatched to purchase Bengali members of the assembly to weaken Bengal's unity. One of Zulfi's 5 contests would be won in Lahore, where he drew his largest Punjab crowd. Just a month before the polls opened, he declaimed that his People's Party had come into being only for the poor people, workers, and the peasants. Other parties are the stooges of the capitalists. They have sucked the blood of the people and have mercilessly looted them. On 18th November, Zulfi addressed his largest national audience, asserting over radio and television that it is our moral duty to lift the people of Pakistan from the quagmire of poverty. The awakening of the people and their increasing determination to resist exploitation endangered vested interests who were exploiting religion to divert popular attention from the poverty and oppression found everywhere. He went on to say, the unresolved problems are legion. The cancerous growth of corruption has to be arrested. We promise that we shall tackle the problem of corruption vigorously. We promise to the people of Pakistan that we will give them a clean administration. We pledge to you that our government will consist of men of integrity. We will come down with a heavy hand on crime and violence. We will control rising prices. We will provide fair wages. We will remove the ghettos and clear the spectre of slums. We will restore the freedom of the press. We will electrify villages and we will recognize student power, the fountainhead of our future. We will fortify our defenses and increase the wages of the government servants at the lower echelons. We will protect the rights of the minorities. We will abolish black laws. We will seek to give free medical aid to the poor. We will take the flood control measures. Heavy industries will be owned by people. I make this pledge to you solemnly as a Muslim and as a Pakistani. Zulfi's Pakistan's People's Party won 62 out of the 82 seats in Punjab and 18 out of the 27 in Sindh, and 1 seat in Northwest Frontier Province, capturing 81 seats, just over half of the total won by Mujib's Awami League, which won 160 seats, all from East Pakistan. A few days after the results were announced, Zulfi thanked his supporters at a rally outside the Punjab Assembly in Lahore and congratulated Mujib. We respect the majority, but both Punjab and Sindh are centers of power. We may or may not form a government at the center, but the keys of Punjab Assembly chambers are in my pocket. In the other lie the keys of the Sindh Assembly, and no central government can run without our cooperation. He then openly warned Mujib as well as Yahya. If the People's Party does not support it, no government will be able to work, nor will the constitution be framed. The center needs our cooperation. When I say that we must get our due, I mean that I am ready to die for my people. Mujib saw no reason to strike a deal with Zulfi Bhutto before taking up the reins he had so clearly won in a free and fair election. No power on earth would be able to frustrate the legitimate demands of Bangladesh, Mujib insisted on 17th December 1970. Yahya agreed, flying to Dhaka early in January 1971 to meet with Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, to whom he referred openly as the next Prime Minister of Pakistan. Shortly after returning from Dhaka, Yahya, along with Pirzada, flew to Ladkana, where they stayed with Bhutto on 17th January. The president informed us of his discussions at Dhaka, in which he told Mujibur Rahman that 3 alternatives were open to the Awami League, namely, to try and go it alone, to cooperate with the People's Party, or to cooperate with the small and defeated parties of the West Wing, and that, in his opinion, the best course would be for the 2 majority parties to arrive at an agreement. For our part, we discussed with the President the implications of the 6 points and expressed our serious misgivings about them. Zulfi then deputed G.M. Khar, his party's Punjab General Secretary, to Dhaka to meet with Mujib and lay the groundwork for his own flight for a summit meeting there on 27th January 1971. Zulfi was disappointed to find Mujib intractable, reporting later that Mujib insisted that he was not in a position to deviate 1 inch from 6 points. Zulfi countered that public opinion in the West Wing was against 6 points. The general impression there being that 6 points spelled the end of Pakistan. He pressed Mujib to agree to a reasonable delay before convening the National Assembly, but Mujib was firm on 15th February. Zulfi feared that once the assembly met, it would immediately elect a speaker from the east and then impose a 6 point constitution. His strategy, therefore, was to boycott an early meeting of the National Assembly in Dhaka. He met his party lieutenants on 2nd February in Lahore, 2 days later in Karachi, and the following week in Multan, ordering them to stay away from Dhaka at all costs. Zulfi met with Yahya again in Pindi on 11th February and urged him to postpone convening the assembly for at least another 6 weeks. 2 days later, Yahya announced that the assembly would meet in Dhaka on 3rd March for the purpose of framing a constitution for Pakistan. Zulfi's response to Yahya's announcement was that his party would not attend the session. We cannot go there only to endorse the constitution already prepared by a party and return humiliated. Zulfi warned his newly elected delegates to the National Assembly that he would break the legs of any party member who dared attend. All agreed to hand him their written resignations before the end of February in order to strengthen his bargaining position with Mujib and Yahya. The country is passing through a grave crisis, Zulfi warned on the Punjab University campus in Lahore late in February 1971. When I went to East Pakistan, I told Mr. Mujib that it was his Awami League that had been elected on 6 points, not the People's Party. I told him that we had been elected on the basis of our stand on revolutionary changes in the economic system and on evolving an independent foreign policy, that we would try our utmost to cooperate with him. However, there is a limit. If we went too far, it would lead the country to disaster. Zulfi thought he could pressure Mujib into backing down. He hoped to convince Mujib that he could control the east wing of Pakistan, but only if Mujib agreed to leave Bhutto in charge of the west. Mr. Mujib quotes me as saying that, if need be, I would go to Dhaka for talks. Zulfi told his student audience in Lahore, well, I am prepared for 2, 3 or even 10 rounds of talks. We have great respect for the people of East Pakistan, just as we have for the people of Punjab, NWFP, Balochistan and Sindh. Their interests are our interests. But it is painful that slogans based on provincial prejudices are raised. Why do they not raise slogans for the whole Pakistan? If we are to serve our country, our nation and our religion, we will have to strike off the shackles of exploitation. The success of the People's Party here and the Awami League there have been made possible by the people. Here was Zulfi's solution, put as diplomatically yet as bluntly as he could phrase it, as he believed it, wishing to serve his country, his nation, his religion, and eventually to strike off the shackles of exploitation. Idhar hum, udhar tum was the Urdu formulation used. Us here, you there. The People's Party would control West Pakistan, the Awami League would run the East. In personal terms, that meant Zulfi over the West, Mujib over the East, or as Zulfi now put it more delicately. In both parts of the country, only the people have emerged victorious. That is why we avoided a confrontation. In fact, we kept retreating. We did not play up our differences. We went to East Pakistan to explain our stand. I held conferences with my colleagues in Lahore, Multan, and Karachi. We retreated so much that people began to ask what happened to Bhutto. But it is regrettable that Mr. Mujib remained rigid. The president of Pakistan went to Dhaka and announced that Mujib would be the prime minister of the country, but said they had had satisfactory talks, so it was presumed that the constitution had virtually been framed. But we have a duty to those millions who elected us. Thus, Zulfi reminded Yahya as well as Mujib of his singular sensitivity and unique strength, as if superior electoral numbers alone would matter to a true Pakistani Muslim. India had many more voters than all of Bangladesh, after all. Mr. Z.A. Bhutto and the People's Party have suddenly started striking postures and issuing pronouncements, which reveal a tendency to subvert the constitutional process by obstructing the normal functioning of the National Assembly. Mujib told the press in a special release on 24th February. Haunted by the spectre of famine and denied the bare means of subsistence, the people of Bangladesh have been reduced to a state of total destitution. We can, on no account, allow this state of affairs to continue. It is unfortunate that Bengalis have in effect been duped as enemies in whose midst the representatives from West Pakistan would feel themselves hostages. Unwarranted aspirations were cast on Bengali members of the National Assembly when the assembly was termed a slaughterhouse. All these extravagant charges were made only because the session of the National Assembly had been called at Dhaka. If the atmosphere is poisoned in this way, could not the Bengalis legitimately question whether they should be called upon to go to West Pakistan? The conspirators and the vested interests and their lackeys are embarking upon the last desperate bid to frustrate the adoption of a constitution by the elected representatives of the people and the transfer of power to them. 3 days later, Zulfi addressed a huge meeting in Lahore. I proposed two alternatives to resolve the present crisis: postponement of the National Assembly session or removal of the 120-day limit for the Assembly to frame a constitution. If either of these alternatives is accepted, I shall go to Dhaka tomorrow to meet Mr. Mujibur Rahman to resolve the pre-session deadlock. If the session of the Assembly is held on March 3rd without PPP's participation, I shall launch a popular agitation from one end of West Pakistan to the other. The gauntlet was thrown more towards Yahya Khan than Mujib. I shall go to Dhaka tomorrow, he said, not offering even to accompany the president or to discuss his solution first with the powers who nominally ruled as yet from Pindi. Zulfi felt neglected by Yahya, offended by that little general to whom he had extended much hospitality in Larkana and had been specially considerate, thanks to Pirzada's adroit diplomacy, never attacking him as mercilessly as he had attacked Ayub Khan. Soon Yahya's turn would come, however, for he had had the temerity to speak of Mujib as Prime Minister simply because Mujib's party won the most seats in a National Assembly destined never to meet. I refute the allegation levelled by Mr. Mujibur Rahman that I have been conspiring to create impediments in the transfer of power. Zulfi went on. It is unimaginable that I could be in league with bureaucrats or the capitalists or the regime or any foreign power because all of them have shown consistent hostility to the People's Party. It is for the preservation of Pakistan that I have been struggling. I would offer any sacrifice for it. Zulfi meant it. At least part of him did. If the country disintegrates, there will be nothing left to save. Still more, exception has been taken to my statement that the PPP members would be double hostages in East Pakistan and that the National Assembly would be a slaughterhouse for them. I cannot afford to be away from West Pakistan for 120 days when Indian troops are massed on the West Pakistan borders. My duty is to be with my people when their security is being threatened. If the National Assembly meets on 3rd March, my party will launch a campaign of protest. On 1st March, Yahya capitulated. The National Assembly would be summoned at a later date. Mujib met with his party leaders immediately, angrily announcing that a 6-day strike would start in Dhaka and be extended throughout Bangladesh on the 3rd of March. On 7th March, he would reveal his final program at a mass meeting planned for the race course Maidan in Dhaka. You will see history made if the conspirators fail to come to their senses, he promised. Mujib singled out Bhutto as the one leader of a minority party who had always been acting in the most irresponsible manner. The next day, Zulfi held a press conference in Karachi. God is our witness that all our efforts since the election have been directed to finding a solution to the constitutional problem, which would not only right the injustices done to the people of East Pakistan in the past, but also enable all the people of the nation to live in harmony. He had obviously not expected Mujib to launch a general strike. He had underestimated the depth of Bengali frustration, desperation, and disenchantment in his search to negotiate a better position for himself. We demanded postponement of the National Assembly session only to provide the two major parties with an opportunity to have another dialogue, Zulfi explained. We are willing to have this dialogue anywhere at any time that the Awami League would like. The streets of Dhaka were flooded with people by now, and Bangladesh's labor pains had begun. Several unarmed young men were fired upon at Farmgate, 2 of them killed on the first day of the strike. They have been shot at because they, along with the rest of the people of Bangladesh, had stood up to protest against the gross insult inflicted upon Bangladesh by the powers that be, Mujib protested. I urge the elements who are seeking to co-confront the people with force to desist forthwith. Firing upon unarmed masses amounts to genocide and is a crime against humanity. Mujib called upon every Bengali, including government officials, not to cooperate in any way with anti-people forces. All government offices and courts were closed, as were semi-official transport operations, including Pakistan International Airlines and Railways. The only planes that flew into Dhaka were military planes in which every seat was filled with crack Punjabi and Pathan soldiers dressed in civilian clothes. Throughout the month of March, thousands of Pakistani troops would thus be airlifted into Bangladesh in preparation for the final desperate attempt to hold by force the allegiance of 70 million alienated Bengalis. A regiment of Balochi troops reached the port of Chittagong aboard the Swat on 3rd March, but Bengali stevedores refused to lift its ammunition out of deep cargo holds. Barricades went up at major crossroads between that port city and the capital to its north as the land of Bengal braced itself for the most violent blows of all. Admiral S.M. Ahsan, who before partition had served on Lord Louis Mountbatten's staff and then became military secretary to the Governor-General Jinnah, was governor of East Pakistan at this time. He courageously refused to order Pakistani troops to open fire on striking Bengalis. He was relieved of his command on 1st March. Yahya initially replaced the good admiral with Major General Shahabzada Yaqub Khan, but he too rejected genocidal orders, hence was replaced by Lieutenant General Tikka Khan, who had never shown the slightest reluctance to order troops to fire on anyone. On 6th March, Yahya announced to the nation his latest step. He would convene the new National Assembly in Dhaka on 25th March. Mujib addressed an estimated million Bengalis who filled the racecourse Maidan in the heart of Dhaka the next afternoon. There is still time for us to live as brothers if things are settled peacefully. No one can stop us from realizing our rights when we are prepared to lay down our lives. We have learned how to shed blood. His Awami League lieutenants were ready to carry on if Mujib were arrested or shot. Bangladesh would, indeed, be born soon after the imminent bloodbath. The exodus of 10 million refugees to India would follow.